Well, today I think is a great day to have a conversation about integrated health. It's something that we really lack worldwide in our medical systems, our personal training and strength coaching systems, in every branch, of allied healthcare, whether it be acupuncture, massage, any of them. There is some people that do have some pieces of the puzzle, and certainly are helping people with those pieces. But what I'm going to share with you today is an approach to integrated health that I developed progressively throughout my now 41-year career. And I will do my best with the limited time I have in a podcast to show you what CHEK professionals are taught in the CHEK Academy, which for most people is about a 5-year process where they go through a block of training, then they practice, so they get hands-on training, and then they go through an additional block of training, and they work with instructors and mentors and have forums to communicate with each other and progressively master the types of topics and concepts I'm going to share with you today. Now, you might wonder, well, why do we need such an integrated health approach? Well, COVID was probably a great example to tell you that's fresh in your mind. People that had comorbidities had a lot more problems with the emotional stress, with the onset of illness and death. And so comorbidities are almost always chronic diseases. And depending on what research you look at today, you'll find that chronic disease is between 70% and 90% of all the diseases out there. In other words, 70% of them to 90% of them are chronic diseases. And when we look at the cost of that, that's costing us 70+% of medical costs worldwide. And what's even more concerning is that the rate of chronic health challenges is growing 5 to 8% a year. So when we've got as much as 90% of the cost worldwide, and even having had 2 surgeon generals in the United States previously state that of the top 10 diseases killing people, 90% of them could be addressed through diet and lifestyle modification, we can see that a lot of these problems start at the ground level with how people live and manage themselves and what they understand about diet and lifestyle issues. So today what I'm going to do is give you an overview of the integrative approach to health and rehabilitation that I developed in my career, what CHEK professionals are trained to do, and I will also take you through an overview of how to apply the integrated approach that I teach through the process you see on this map here, which is my CHEK Life Process Alchemy system, which took me many, many years of study and practice to develop. And I finally had it as a working system about 10 years ago. And it's part of the CHEK Institute training program education. And they learn different levels of it over the course of their training, because you have to learn key pieces of it to master them before you add too many pieces or you just get lost. But as I'll show you, it's actually quite simple and common sense in how it works and in the basic principles that I'll share. And what I'll do today is I will use the typical case of low back pain as a model, pretending that we're working with a low back pain patient, and what we would have to look at from an integrated health approach to resolve that, get to the roots of it, and really cause or create or support the person in a long-term resolution of an issue like back pain. And low back pain is the most common orthopedic challenge in the world amongst human beings, and has been for as long as I've been a therapist. So to begin with, I would like to say a couple of things. One, 85% of all the pains and problems that people come to doctors for, particularly structural problems, are what are classified as idiopathic, which simply means that the patient cannot tell the doctor of any specific incident in which they hurt themselves, like falling off a ladder, picking up a box and hurting their back, or a suitcase. They just come with pain. They don't know how it got there, and they just want help. And so whenever you see a number that high, that's 85 out of every 100 people can't tell the doctor or the therapist what caused their pain, that almost always points back to diet and lifestyle factors, or a confluence of multiple different sources of imbalance or pain in the body, adding up to create a total stress picture that leads to the body starting to break down. In the human body, all stress summates and all pain summates. What that means, summates means adds up. So if a person has multiple health challenges going on, they will add up to create a total stress picture. And the body's response, which could be anything from digestive troubles to ulcers to back pain to visual disturbance to sexual impotence, you name it, because each of us handles stress differently, and each of us has a different psychological profile and different genetics. So these things always have to be considered when you're doing an integrated approach to healing. Now, to give you a little background, I started the CHEK Institute in 1995. I began my work professionally in 1984 as the trainer of the United States Army boxing team, where I worked for 2 years with an osteopathic physician and learned how to care for acute sports injuries by being present and getting taught by the osteopathic physician. And my job was to manage their nutrition coaching. I was a sports massage therapist, so I did sports massage therapy for the 30 boxers on this elite amateur boxing team. I managed in the gym. I wrote all their conditioning programs, and unlike most trainers, I did everything with them. I also was a fighter on the team before I became the trainer, so I was very well steeped in the stresses they were dealing with, how much time we trained a day, what the challenges were. So by the time I was asked to become the trainer, I had a good inside look at what kinds of things needed to change. And a little background to that, one of the reasons I was asked to become the trainer of the Army boxing team is because I also represented the United States Army in triathlon. At the same time I was fighting on the Army boxing team. My coaches thought that that was some kind of a miracle, because we trained 5 to 7 hours a day, 7 days a week on the boxing team. Rarely did we get a day off, which was one of the problems. They were overtraining us. And so they couldn't figure out how in the world I could train and be competitive in triathlon at the USTS distance and win the Army triathlon and end up going to represent the United States Army in 1986 at the USTS National Championships. And so their question was, Paul, how in the world do you do that? And they already knew that I was living very differently and eating very differently, because I would be bringing things like cut raw vegetables and a little bit of chicken. And I would finish my training and have a grapefruit. I had to be very careful with how much I ate. I fought at 147, which is welterweight. And at that time, my normal walking around weight was 168. So I had to lose quite a bit of weight, and I didn't have much body fat to begin with. So I would plan my weight loss over 3 months and carefully do it before major tournaments, so that I could get in the boxing ring and not be completely exhausted, which is one of the major problems that pretty much all fighters were facing at the time because of the strategies they were using. So when I came in as the trainer, I began making changes right away. I also implemented a very carefully planned weightlifting program into our boxing training for a variety of reasons, from strength endurance development to knockout punching power development. And those things were all novel. And there was a number of things I introduced that I look back on today and could see, even as a very young man, I kind of had my ideas right, which I must credit my mother for, because my mother was a yogi. You've probably heard me talk about that in podcasts. So my mom was very, very holistic, and we lived predominantly off of our 142-acre farm on Vancouver Island. So I had a really solid understanding of holistic eating. My mother joined the Self Realization Fellowship when I was 12, and Yogananda's teachings are very, very holistic. His approach to diet and exercise is very holistic. And with most all of our food coming from the farm and local farmers' co-ops, I was raised eating healthy food, living on a farm, and I was very aware of and connected to the cycles of life, death, seasons, and everything that you have to understand as a farmer. So by the time I was a competitive fighter, I was already well grounded and well aware of what whole food eating was. I had come from a background in hardcore athletics, so I had kind of the necessary building blocks in place that would carry me through my career as a foundation and a way of looking at life and looking at people's challenges. And it turns out that a lot of what I'll share with you today would be basic farming and gardening principles, and basic farming and gardening principles turn out to be the very principles that our human body is governed by. So we are nature, and nature is in us. And if we don't live according to our nature, then we end up being a statistic in some medical report or government report somewhere, and often spend a lot of our time, energy, and money dealing with doctors' offices, drug prescriptions, and things that are generally not helping people in the long run. Not that there's not a place for those things, but I don't think I need to convince you of the fact that all you got to do is look at what's going on in the world today, and clearly the model is not getting us there. And so, what I can assure you from my years in this profession is that the medical system is not a healthcare system, it's a disease maintenance or disease management system. And they actually don't want people getting better, because then they're not profit centers anymore. CHEK professionals are trained to get rid of their clients. The goal of every CHEK professional is to educate and support the client as needed in their own healing process, so that by the time you finish, they don't need you anymore. They have diet and lifestyle training. They know how to take care of their body. They know how to stretch. They know how to mobilize. They know how to use tools like Swiss balls, foam rollers, and other devices. They know how to use gym equipment as necessary for whatever it is that they've come to the CHEK professional for. They know how to shop for real food. They know the importance of supporting local organic farmers. And so our goal is to get rid of our patients and clients, not keep them hanging around. Now, I say patients because a lot of CHEK professionals are doctors, they're chiropractors, they're osteopaths, they're acupuncturists, nurses. We've got people in the system from every branch in the world, and I developed the CHEK Institute as a multidisciplinary system because I felt it was very important for us to cross-pollinate each other so that we could get a perspective from a medical doctor, for example, or an orthopedic surgeon on how you would treat low back pain versus what a neurologist might do, versus what an acupuncturist might do, versus what a Feldenkrais practitioner might do, or an Alexander practitioner might do, or a herbologist might do, etc. And that is very important, because without that kind of knowledge, you don't know how to identify when you need to refer somebody to somebody else. And the medical system does not cross-pollinate people like that. It's very, very isolated, and it's broken down into more and more specializations, to the point that now what you have is, there's the old definition: what is an expert? Someone who knows more and more about less and less until they know absolutely everything about nothing. And unfortunately, that's the problem we have in the world today. For example, the average medical doctor only gets 4 hours of nutrition training. Some get as little as 1, some none. And so we're dealing with a medical profession that is so oriented towards selling drugs and procedures that it has lost touch with what medicine's really all about, and has lost touch with the Hippocratic Oath, which is first, do no harm. And the goal of every CHEK professional is to use the easiest, most free approaches that anybody can apply to restore their ability to heal and to recover and find balance so that they actually can rely on and utilize things that are easy to do, practical, and accessible, such as walking, eating real food, drinking water, um, stretching, things, learning how to how to cultivate life force energy, things that are very, very important but are not taught. Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I imagine you know that magnesium is one of the minerals that people in North America are the most deficient in, but it's an extremely important mineral to have in your diet regularly. And believe it or not, Bioptimizers has improved what was already well known to be the best magnesium formula out there called Magnesium Breakthrough. So I've got Wade Lightheart with me to explain what it is they've done to improve this already excellent formula. Wade, what is new about your new Mag Breakthrough formula?
Well, it's called sucrosomial magnesium. So we have 7 different types of magnesium in Magnesium Breakthrough because they're uptaken by different parts of the body. But a new type of magnesium has been created called sucrosomial. And what it shows in the research and science is that it's actually even more absorbable by the body, particularly inside of the brain, which is a big aspect to enhance neurotransmitter formation, as well as ensuring the rest and relax response in the nervous system that a lot of people will take magnesium for. They find it, clocks them down, helps them sleep better, allows for the relaxation of striated and smooth muscle tissue in the body, which creates an energetic relief. And so when we added sucrosomial, we were able to demonstrate inside our lab facility that we were able to get better improvements. Of course, we have a partnership with Birch International University. We have some patents we're working on, which will kind of relay some of these things. But sucrosomial was a no-brainer when we added to the formula, improved the results or improved the uptake. And the reports back from our testing team were like, wow, we get more results with less caps. And that's always the goal for our company.
That's excellent. I love it. I always say, and people have probably heard me say it before, I'm so amazed how you guys are constantly and always improving and working your best to not only make better products for us, but it doesn't seem to me that it gets more expensive as you make them better. So that's a real gift to the world. Thank you.
And now Bioptimizer's Magnesium Breakthrough is available in a delicious flavored drink powder. It's packed with all 8 forms of magnesium, sweetened with Katem fruit extract that is 3,000 times sweeter than sucrose but does not spike glucose when metabolized, and made with organic flavors and colors. Choose from fruit punch flavor, raspberry lemonade, banana mango, or add your own choice to the unflavored options. To try Magnesium Breakthrough drink, go to bioptimizers.com/living4D and use the promo code Paul10 for 10% off your first order. That's bioptimizers.com/living, the number 4, the letter D, and the promo code is Paul10.
Now, with that said, a little history. I began the CHEK Institute 30 years ago. I started it in 1995. We're almost through here with 2025. So it was quite a while ago. And prior to starting the Institute, I had served as the trainer on the Army boxing team for 2 years. Then I went to sports massage therapy school and later got qualified as a holistic health practitioner in the state of California. I studied Norwegian medical exercise therapy. I did my advanced training in neuromuscular therapy and traveled around the world for a good 20 years nonstop whenever I could, learning from the best experts I could in every field where I felt that I needed more knowledge to help people. And I continue those studies to this very, very day. And so the CHEK Institute was founded on 2 years working as the trainer of the Army boxing team, sports massage therapy school, 2 years working with a chiropractor specializing in sports injuries, 4 years in the largest sports and orthopedic physical therapy clinic in San Diego with 22 physical therapists, athletic trainers, and 13 orthopedic and neurosurgeons in a surgical center there. And then I went and started my own physical therapy clinic with a partner, which we owned for 3 years. But ultimately, what led to the starting of the CHEK Institute was that we could not do what we both knew we needed to do to help people, because the way the insurance system's set up is they will only pay you a certain amount of money per visit, often far less than what we needed to run the company, to run our business and pay ourselves. And they only give you a prescribed number of visits. So quite often I would get people, for example, with a bulging L5S1 disc in very acute pain and would be told, I only have 6 visits of 30 minutes. Well, 6 visits of 30 minutes is only 3 hours. And when you see what I'm going to share with you today, you'll realize why the medical system is in dire straits, because you just cannot even begin to touch the issues that have to be addressed to help people with almost everything they see doctors for on a daily basis. So when I started the CHEK Institute, I had begun professionally, lecturing professionally in 1988, and I was traveling around mostly to physical therapy clinics that had read my articles or heard about my work and wanted me to come and teach their therapists. And so I was teaching an integrated approach. At that time, I was teaching them how to integrate strength and conditioning, stretching, joint mobilization, some diet and lifestyle factors, postural re-education, and the use of corrective exercise, and how to transition people progressively back to high-intensity sports such as football, weightlifting, combat sports, things like that. And so it was a very unique approach all the way back in '88. People found it very fascinating and interesting, and it was very, very effective. And I've built it up massively since then. So when I started the CHEK Institute, I also noticed that there was a huge, massive black hole of emptiness in the strength coaching and personal training world, and that the level of education personal trainers and strength coaches were getting relative to what they needed was dangerously low. The example I give is that if you go to a rehab clinic where people have 4-year degrees and often master's degrees, the biggest thing they're doing there with people, the maximum load they're putting on is rubber stretch bands and pink dumbbells. When you go to the gym, people are putting up to 3 times body weight on people, doing heavy lifting, and intense circuit programs and CrossFit style programs and things like that, but they have almost no evaluation skills. And in an environment where we have a culture, world culture, full of what I call Humpty Dumptys, people that have multiple problems that are unaddressed or that are being ineffectively addressed, coming to a gym where they're going to get pushed real hard, it leads to a lot of complications, and countless is the number of people I've seen actually end up getting badly hurt in gyms and misled in gyms with bogus nutrition concepts. And so I felt that it was important for me to try to bring some holistic integrated approaches to the exercise industry as well as the rehabilitation industry. So that was what the CHEK Institute began with the intention of doing. Then in the year 2000, I realized, quite embarrassingly, after saying the same things over and over for year after year after year and telling people, here's how you look at your poop, and this is what it means when you have a poop that's light and floating, or this is what it means when they're dark and sinking. This is what a healthy poop looks like. This is how you can use your poop to monitor your diet and relative factors such as hydration and make adjustments. Here's how much water you need to drink a day. Here's common stretches and joint mobilizations that you need to do to balance your body. And so it dawned on me that people were having to pay me a lot of money to learn what we should all be learning, but they were coming when they were already injured. And so I thought, out of the goodness of my heart and as a public service, I should write a book that gives people a means of assessing themselves to identify which systems in the body are under too much load, and then a systematic approach to how to identify which things in your diet and lifestyle and exercise program need to change, how to do key assessments on yourself, such as assessing whether or not your core works, whether or not you're eating right for your metabolic, individual or unique metabolic needs, and how to determine, for example, if you have leaky gut syndrome, if your digestion is optimal or not functioning correctly. And then by using the book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, people are guided to make those changes. And as many of you listening will know, the book's been extremely successful. We've sold over 250,000 copies now, and it's still going strong. And I've got letters from all over the world from families, mothers, people who were able to completely heal themselves, get off long-term medical drug use, and go back to playing, having fun, and living a more full life. And so those principles that were taught in How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy are kind of like the basic training for all CHEK professionals. And that training, studying that book is part of their prerequisites, but it's also available to the public. So anybody else that wants to get healthy for about $25 can get all the education they're not going to get in almost any healthcare or medical office in the world. Unfortunately, to this very day, that is true. So the approach that I've used has been very, very successful and very, very well taken in by the professional athlete community. I've worked, as a lot of you would know, for many professional sports teams over my career. I've worked for multiple Olympic committees, militaries. I have been able to help 5 of the world's greatest athletes who are forced into medical retirement come out of retirement. And I've been a consultant to many of the world's greatest athletes. And they have all been very, very happy with what they've learned and applied. And it's helped them go on and have long careers and be successful. A good example, I'll just give you one of many cases I could give you. A famous horse racer named Richard Dunwoody from England he was forced into medical retirement. He'd had 40 bad falls racing horses. He also raced cars. But when he got to the point where he couldn't shift gears in his race car and he was forced into medical retirement, he had quite a severe neck injury. His whole left arm, if I remember right, had atrophied to the point where you could literally see the bones sticking out. And through connections in London, he found out about me, came to California, spent a few weeks with me, and I was able to figure out what was going on, develop all the corrective exercise programs, do the necessary manual therapy, and then get him to the point where he was stable enough that I could hook him up with another CHEK professional in London. And then I guided the programs from there. He was able to go back, pass his medical exam, and then shortly thereafter won the Triple Crown and wrote about his work with me in his autobiography. So that's a kind of a classic example of how you can apply these techniques. And even when people think their career is over, it's usually just because they have not been educated as to what you got to do to keep the body healthy and restore it, and how to optimize its function. And that's what we teach CHEK professionals all over the world. And that's what I'm going to give you a sample of today. So again, we have quite a serious situation in the world with all the chronic pain and the rising costs of healthcare. And it's sad, but the number one cause for bankruptcy in the United States today is medical expenses. More people go bankrupt due to medical expenses than any other cause, which when I learned that from my research was really surprising, because I thought it would just be mismanagement of money, overspending on credit cards, but it turns out no. People's entire life savings are being wiped out by medical bills, mostly for things that are not really very, very effective, and they're ultimately just treating symptoms because they're in a disease maintenance system, not a health care system. So what I'd like to do today is I would like to show you an overview of my CHEK Life Process Alchemy system. And we are going to look at a case pretending that we have a low back pain patient. So I'm going to show you what a CHEK professional would look at as a means of helping somebody with low back have a long-term resolution of healing, and how would they get to the root issues and know what it is that's the most important to look at with regard to what's actually the root cause of their low back pain.
When Paul started presenting his Flatten Your Abs Forever seminar at events over 20 years ago, I still remember how shocked people were to learn that flat abs had more to do with posture, breathing, and digestion than endless crunches and ab exercises. The response was amazing, and I typically had people coming up to me after a presentation and saying, "I've been training for years, but no one ever explained the body like this." It's moments like this that show how powerful the CHEK approach is. When you start looking at the body as one complete system, everything changes. Now, the CHEK Institute has launched an all-new version of Flatten Your Abs Forever, a complete video program that walks you step by step through the process of building strong, flat, and functional abs the right way. It uses Paul's proven system that's helped thousands of people transform their health from the inside out. And right now, you can claim the brand new Flatten Your Abs Forever bundle for free when you sign up at chek.group/flatabs. You can also find this link in the show notes. Along with the new video program, you'll also get 3 incredible bonuses from Paul and the CHEK Institute. The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need ebook, a clear, practical guide to achieving lasting health. The Big Bang Workout, a time-saving routine packed with Paul's most effective exercises. And the Gut Health Reset video, your step-by-step plan to support healthy digestion and flatten your midsection naturally. That's a value of $99, and those 3 bonuses are yours free when you sign up for the Flatten Your Abs Forever bundle. It's a limited time offer, so just head to chek.group/flatabs and claim yours today. I've seen firsthand how this information can change lives. If you've been chasing results that never seem to last, this is where it starts, with real knowledge, a proven system, and the guidance of Paul and the CHEK Institute.
So now I'm going to give you an overview of what I've called CHEK Life Process Alchemy. This is a system that I built over the span of study of at least 30 years of deep study of Rudolf Steiner's teaching, Carl Jung's teachings on depth psychology, the study of agriculture, soil science, farming science, which was rooted in my own childhood experience of living on a large, productive working farm. And what I did was I was looking at how all these things fit together for many, many years, but I was having a very hard time reconciling how to make them all work together, because there's many contradictions in different systems, even in alchemy, where if you look at different systems, they contradict each other, kind of like what happens if you use the 4-element Aristotelian system against a 5-element Chinese medicine system. There's things that are similar, but things that are different, so it creates conflicts. So the long and the short of it is it took me many, many years of research and progressive development to integrate all these different approaches into a working system that actually is fully functional and can be used at the level of the physical reality, the emotional reality, the mental reality, the spiritual reality, and the social reality. So the map you see in front of you is the master map of CHEK Life Process Alchemy. And as I said, I'm going to show you how a CHEK professional, especially when they've finished all their training, because then they've got the training in the full use of the map, would look at a patient of any type or a client with low back pain, or actually anything, because we use the same approach, because we have to look at the same underlying factors. Now, to begin with, I will point out that if you're listening to this and you're not watching this, in the show notes, there should be a PDF of the diagram showing the map I'm looking at. And if you look at that while listening to the podcast, it'll be a lot easier to follow, but I'll be describing everything I'm talking about as I go so you don't get lost if you are just listening. Now, to begin our journey with how a CHEK professional or somebody practicing truly integrative health would look at things. Now, I can only share with you what I know from my own practice because there's a lot of different approaches to integrated health and medicine out there. So my approach today is based on what I've learned and what I've practiced and what I've found to be effective. What I had to do early in my career was identify what are the most important things to look at, no matter who's seeing you, because they're common to all of us and they're very, very relevant to what's going on in a human body and a human being emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, because all of those levels interact with each other constantly. They cannot be separated. Just like your mind controls your material body, and your material body, your physical body, if it's out of balance, has an influence on your mind. We always have to look at how does the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of a person interact with each other and identify problems or sources of pain or confusion or stress or wounding at each level, because they can each affect and create symptoms at a different level. So somebody could be, for example, coming to you with a stomach ulcer, and you could treat the stomach ulcer and get temporary relief, but not realize that the stomach ulcer is the symptom of the stress of somebody going through a divorce, of which I've seen many cases of exactly that. So I identified a 4-step model, and I will explain that to you now. Step number 1 is, what is your dream? What is your dream, goal, or objective? Psychologist Jerry Wesh says if you have a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis. And those words should be printed on billboards everywhere. That's true. So the first thing that I want to do as a therapist, and I teach all CHEK professionals to do, is identify what is it that you love enough to learn and grow for and overcome the resistance or the inertia to change. Earlier in my career, I wrote many very, very good, very scientific programs, but the biggest challenge I had was getting people to do them. So I realized after a number of years that I had to study psychology and behavioral change, because no matter how much pain people were in, they were so fixated in their programming and their coping strategies that the idea of getting better wasn't strong enough, even when the program was good, to keep them compliant. So we begin our work with, what is it that you love enough and are committed enough and have a buy-in from your heart to do the work, to learn, to heal, to change, and to grow. So we call that, what is the client's dream, which can also be their specific goal or objective. But we have to qualify that, because often people say things that they don't really mean, or they say what they think at a superficial level, but it's not deep enough to carry them through the necessary challenges of healing, such as changing behavior or changing diet or lifestyle, or being committed to a stretching, exercise, mobilization program, or doing the inner work, such as meditation or exercises like Tai Chi or Qigong to cultivate life force energy. So step 1 is, what is your dream, goal, or objective? So if I was working with someone that had low back pain, the first thing I'm going to ask is, what is your dream, goal, or objective for change? I'm going to ask key questions to make sure that I help them find something that their heart buys into. I use a rating scale of 10 would be kamikaze pilot, committed, 0 would be completely disinterested. And I found if people aren't at least a 7+ level of commitment, that they're not going to stick to the program. And people need to have something that gives them levity, something to draw them forward into the realization that if they do the healing work, that they will get to do that. So if someone has low back pain, for example, Um, I've had many elderly patients with low back pain, and their dream was to be able to play with their grandchildren without having pain all the time, or to just be able to play and not be stuck, walking around with a cane or a walker. So, number one is listed right here. What is your one love? Next is two. The 1, 2 is there's only two forces that create everything in the universe. That's yin, the feminine, and yang, the masculine. So you see that right here. This is called sun face, right where his third eye would be. And that means that what we're looking for when we're doing an assessment on anybody with back pain or anything else is what is the relative balance of catabolic, which means tissue destructive, energy spending, and resource spending energies relative to anabolic, which means tissue restorative and regenerative healing energies. Catabolic is the spending of your energy. Anabolic is the accumulation of your energy. Another way to look at these two forces, the catabolic yang and the anabolic yin, is this way. If you take a piece of toast and you throw it in a frying pan, it'll get hot and it eventually will shrivel and it'll turn into charcoal. So you will see that the material body starts to shrink, dry up, crack, and crumble, and that would be yang. So yang expresses energy outward and utilizes energy and resources. If you take that same piece of bread and instead of throwing it in a frying pan, you throw it in a bowl with some water in it, you'll notice it'll swell, it'll draw the fluid into itself towards its center and begin to expand until it starts to sweat the water. In other words, it's fully saturated. So yin is the opposite. It multiplies power. Any yin activity, such as eating nutritious food, sleeping, doing Tai Chi or Qigong, anything that is a low stress type activity physically that doesn't elevate heart rate, doesn't elevate breathing rate, that you can do on a full stomach and doesn't cause your tongue to dry out while you're doing it, is a work in activity that increases life force energy or yin energy. So once we know what your dream is, then we have to do an assessment of all the things I'm going to show here. And there's much more that I cannot show here because it would just be too long and comprehensive. But I'm giving you an overview of an integrated health approach. Then we're basically looking at what is the relative balance between how much energy and resources are being spent and how much are being accumulated. And if they're being accumulated, how are they accumulating it? What type of resources and energies are they accumulating? And are they getting the types of energy and resources that the body needs? For example, eating food is yin, as long as you're eating the foods that your body needs and they're giving you an adequate base of nutrition. Because if you eat too much food and it's not giving you what you need, it actually becomes yang, because now the body has to digest, metabolize, assimilate, and detoxify it. So if you're bringing all that energy and resources in, but it's not helping your body, it's actually becoming a stress on the body, then what looks like yin turns out to be yang. If you look at my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I cite PhD nutritionist John Berardi, who says from his research, it takes about 52% of the calories we eat just to run food from mouth to anus. So over half of what you consume is utilized just to run the metabolic systems, the organs and the glands and the body, to get the food from mouth to anus. That's quite a lot when you consider that most people that are athletes calculate calorie consumption without any consideration of how much it costs just to run the machinery of life, metaphorically. So what is your one love? My back pain patient, I want to know what they love enough to change for. Then I'm going to do a comprehensive evaluation of all these factors. I'm going to determine where they're out of balance with regard to energy expression and utilization and resource utilization relative to energy accumulation and resource accumulation. 3 is there are only 3 choices you can make in relationship to any person, place, or thing. So once the CHEK professional has identified what their one love is, done a comprehensive assessment, then they can present the program, and now the client or patient has choices to make And there's only 3 choices we can make: the optimal, which is the best for you and everybody involved; the suboptimal, which usually gives instant gratification but causes problems in the long run, either with yourself or the people that are supporting you; or option 3 is to do nothing. Doing nothing when you have to make a decision that's important but you don't have enough information means calling a timeout and gathering the information you need. The negative derivation of doing nothing is to be apathetic and not to care. So what is your one love, your dream, goal, or objective? Where are you out of balance, relative yin relative to yang? And are you willing to make effective choices? And which choices do you need to make based on what your assessment says, with essential diet and lifestyle factors? And then finally, 4 doctors. I developed the 4-doctor model in approximately 2005 because I needed a way to teach my students to categorize what was important and how to teach people. And so you see the 4 doctors here: Dr. Happiness, which is linked to the air element, which is the vibrational element of alchemy and alchemy of the mind. It correlates with spring, or the beginning of any process, or the season spring. Dr. Happiness is the doctor that's in charge of determining what your values are. So what are your values around food? What are your values around how you manage your money? What are your values around sex and intimacy and marriage? What are your values around rest? What are your values around exercise? So we have to look at all these factors, and that's the domain of Dr. Happiness. So that's the domain of choices. And here you see the word archer, and there you see choices. And the reason Dr. Happiness is called the archer with regard to choices, because once you let an arrow go, you can't call it back. So a choice is going to be something that makes a change in the reality of your life, and often that of those that you share life with. So because of that, if we're making ineffective choices that are not supporting the balancing of our yin and yang, our catabolic tissue destructive versus anabolic tissue restorative and life restorative, then those choices are actually going to keep us injured, sick, profitable to the medical system, etc. So 1 love, 2 forces, 3 choices, 4 doctors, Dr. Happiness. Then we have to look at Dr. Movement, which is here. Dr. Movement correlates to the element fire in alchemy, and that's the summer season. So we have to have values around how we're going to move our body, care for it, what type, how much, stretching versus exercise, working in versus working out, how long should we work out, what types of movement should we do in order to achieve our stated dream, goal, or objective. Then over here, we have Dr. Diet. That relates to the earth element, the earth element in alchemy. Fire is the element by the way of transformation. So fire relates to anything. Fire is the element that turns one thing into another. So if you take an ice cube and heat it up on a stove with fire, it'll turn to water. If you keep going, it'll turn to steam. And if you keep going, it'll become atmosphere. And if you had enough heat, you could turn it into plasma. So over here we have, excuse me, the fall season. And so the earth element in alchemy relates to anything solid. So ice, for example, is a solid, but if you heat it up, it becomes a liquid water. If you heat it up enough, it becomes the air element gas. And if you heat it enough, it becomes the fire element. And so you see the transformation of one substance, water, through the alchemical cycle.
Hydration is one of the 6 CHEK foundation principles for a healthy, holistic life. And now CHEK has made it even easier to help keep your body and skin hydrated while also promoting better sleep, which is another of the CHEK foundation principles, with their new Deep Hydration Protocol. CHEK's Deep Hydration Protocol is a 2-part drinkable skincare system that keeps your body hydrated around the clock. Get a morning boost with BT Fountain, which is powered by clinically proven ceramides and hyaluronic acid for skin radiance and gives gentle, lasting energy to start your day. Relax in the evening with RE Fountain, containing triple biomaxed magnesium to support deep rest, nervous system recovery, and next day mental clarity, helping you unwind and wake up refreshed. As with all of Peak's products, the deep hydration protocol is made with clean, pure ingredients without sugar, fillers, or artificial flavors. It's easy to mix, simple to add into your morning and evening routines, and tastes great. Upgrade your hydration and wake up refreshed. Get 20% off for life, receive a complimentary gift, and explore Peak Life's entire line of CHEK-approved teas and supplements at peaklifecom/Paul Chek. That's PIQUE life.com/Paul Chek.
So our third doctor then is Dr. Diet, which is all about what do you need to eat for your specific individual needs, your unique genetics, your unique metabolic needs. And how can we do that with natural whole food eating and organic clean foods, or biodynamically farmed, or in other words, the highest quality foods we can get. So we're supporting not only our body, but the planet by putting money in the hands of the farmers that are taking care of the planet instead of poisoning it. Then finally, we have Dr. Quiet. Dr. Quiet relates to the water element and to the season winter, which is when our energies come in, the energies of the earth come in and down into the earth, so that the energies go down to the root system of plants to regenerate, to prepare for the next growth season. And Dr. Quiet is the domain of rest, such as sleep, rest from exercise, rest from work, such as vacations or necessary time off so you don't burn out. And Dr. Quiet is the domain of introspection, which would be things like spending time in yourself and with yourself, meditation. Any of the inner arts would fall under the domain of Dr. Quiet and introspection, or spiritual practices, things that have the capacity to not only calm and relax the mind, but regenerate you at a mental emotional level and grow you at a mental emotional level. And so we've just now reviewed the 1, 2, 3, 4 system. What is your 1 love, dream, goal, or objective? 2, after the assessment, where are you out of balance regarding yin and yang, anabolic and catabolic? Yin, anabolic, yang, catabolic. What are the choices you're willing to make to follow the program based on your specific assessment and your specific needs and your criteria for time, energy, money, resources, and willingness? And then we have the 4 doctors, which is how we break the program up, or the guidance up, so that we're not missing anything. And that 4-doctor model is what makes this system an integrated system, because there's no such thing as a healthy 3-doctor person. For example, somebody with low back pain could be breathing fine and could have effective use of their mind. They could be exercising, they could be eating well, but if they're not getting enough sleep, that can create enough of a deficit that the whole system starts to break down. And as you can see by the connecting links here, these are called control systems. The energy flows, as it does in any alchemical process, between the elements. So when you're looking at my sun face map, what I'd like you to think of is a spider's web, and ask yourself this question, and you'll understand immediately what integrated health really is. Can you touch any part of a spider's web without causing changes in the entire web? Well, the answer is no. Well, why is that important? Because when you got a world full of people doing synthetic testosterone and estrogen and various chemicals like that, and biohacking and high-powered nutraceuticals and hormone replacements of this type or another type, you're actually taking one input that most people only look at the research, which typically only looks at that in an isolated way, but it doesn't look at the knock-on effect on how that's going to affect the whole system. And for example, many drugs that are given to patients actually produce side effects that are worse than what they came to the doctor for. And many of the side effects have nothing to do. For example, you could be a back pain patient and get a painkiller that the doctor thinks is going to help you, but the next thing you know, you're severely constipated and have terrible headaches. But those two symptoms will often end up getting treated by other doctors as though they were isolated problems. But that's what happens when you don't have an integrated approach to the body. You make one input, a drug, and you don't see the chain reaction through the whole system. And then you don't recognize the symptoms as the side effects of a previous input. And that is what leads to an allopathic approach or a this for that approach to medicine. And unfortunately, people do that with supplements and natural approaches all the time as well, which is just less stressful overall because it's less toxic, but it's still actually playing the same allopathic this for that game. We've just taken a brief overview. Though we're talking about back pain, I've just given you the 1, 2, 3, 4 structure: 1 love, 2 forces, 3 choices, 4 doctors. Now, when we look here at our 1 love, you see the word archetypes. An archetype is an original pattern. So archetypes are really at the foundation of the human psyche or the human mind. Examples of archetypes are the mother. Everybody comes from a mother. Everyone's got a father. That's the father archetype. Everyone was a child, and sometimes people are children too long, no matter how old their bodies are. So mother, father, child are archetypes. The imago Dei is the archetype of our image of deity or whatever we believe God is. Then we have the archetype of the victim. We have the archetype of the saboteur, the prostitute, and then the negative derivations of the child. Then we have what I call working archetypes, and those working archetypes relate to what a person's doing for a living and whether or not it's passionate to them, whether they're really interested in what they're doing for a living, which unfortunately about 70-75% of people surveyed worldwide say they hate their job. Not that they don't like it, that even stronger than that, 70-75% say they hate their job based on surveys I've seen. Or they have a very negative valuation of their experience at work. So there you see quite a significant stressor. Why that's relevant, it means that they're in the wrong archetype. So for example, I am a therapist practicing holistic health. That would be the caregiver archetype. Anybody working in any kind of medical approach, a nurse, a paramedic, a doctor, an acupuncturist, a massage therapist, those are all different activities that fall within the domain of the caregiver archetype. If you're a carpenter, a plumber, an electrician, or a finish carpenter, you're all working under the archetype of the builder. So when I'm looking at what's going on with my fictitious low back pain patient here, one of the things I want to do is, along with their 1 love, I want to look at what they're doing to make a living, how they're spending their time, energy, and resources, and identify, is there passion there? Is there interest there? Because if there's not, then the act of just getting out of bed every day to go to work is already a stressful thing. And interestingly, if you look at the research on heart disease, the most common time for a heart attack, particularly for men, is Monday morning, and it happens when they have a poop. So when they're straining to have a poop, men commonly have a heart attack Monday morning because the stress of just having to go to work ultimately pushes Humpty Dumpty off the wall and they die of a heart attack. And I've actually known people that I knew personally that died on Monday morning having a poop, which shocked me because I'd read the statistics, but when it happened to people that I knew, I was, well, let's just say that the statistic landed very close to home. I realized these things are very real.
Protein is an essential part of everyday life, but where you get your protein from and when you consume it can make a huge difference. Organifi's Complete Protein makes it easy for you to get high-quality, clean protein into your meals. Start your day with a breakfast shake, and you'll find the ingredients in Organifi's complete protein work together to help reduce cravings all day, as well as providing organic vitamins and minerals. People often assume that if something is organic, it's also free from pesticides and residues. Sadly, that isn't always true. Even in the cleanest of conditions, contamination is still possible. Although Organifi is not required to test for things like glyphosate residue and other chemicals that can affect your health, they take the extra step and spend the extra money to thoroughly test their protein before it goes out the door and into your home. Organifi's complete protein is a unique combination of 3 complex plant-based proteins and other organic whole foods, making it a great choice for those who struggle with bloating or indigestion from dairy or whey protein powders. It comes in 2 great flavors, chocolate or vanilla, and is easy to mix up on its own or add some fruit, nuts, and seeds to make a delicious smoothie. My personal favorite is blending the vanilla with bananas and almond butter. To try Organifi's complete protein and save 20%, go to Organifi.com/CHEK20 and use the promo code CHEK20. That's Organifi.com/CHEK20 and use CHEK20 for a 20% discount.
So here we're looking at the archetypes because we want to know if our low back pain patient may be accumulating stress from constantly engaging in activity, which has almost always got something to do with making money or making a living, that is not fulfilling and that their heart is not involved in. And if that's the case, then we also have to look at the prostitute archetype, which is all about people doing what they think they have to do to make money, but not doing something that's fulfilling to them, which leads to a progressively greater inner crisis and often leads to the use of things like drugs, video games, alcohol consumption, and leads to addictions as coping strategies, which also put tremendous stress on the body, the emotions, and the mind, and can be very challenging to people's religious or spiritual orientation because they're often wandering out of the confines of their religious ideology, which, for example, in Christian terminology, we could say they end up having to sin a lot to cope with the stress that they're dealing with because they're not living their one love in the archetype that is ideal. So quite often for me to help a person heal from back pain, I actually have to look into what it is that they're doing that isn't fulfilling and what are the things that their heart is calling to them to, and how might I be able to help them either by referring them to a career counselor or spending time with them myself, which I've done thousands of times now, to identify what it is that they would love to do and how to work strategically towards moving in that direction so that there's an alleviation of stress and more of a buy-in in that person's life. Then you see the word myth down below. Myth is the story that you're telling yourself to give meaning to your life, or simply put, it's what you believe. So the myth is the story that's guiding your life. Myth and the word story are quite synonymous with each other. And oftentimes, whenever people come to me with pain, what I find is that there is a secret story that they tell themselves on the inside that's in conflict with the story they're telling others. For example, somebody might be a doctor or a school teacher or a mechanic, and to all the people around them, they appear to really enjoy what they're doing, but on the inside, they're really not happy at all and wish they were doing something else, and they're just kind of going through the motions that they've got to go through. So when we have a story on the inside that's different than the story on the outside, that's called a secret story. Rudolf Steiner said, whenever you're dealing with people that have any kind of chronic pain, the most important thing you can do is identify what their secret story is. Carl Jung said something very parallel. He said, in different words, he said, once you identify the secret story, you have to identify what the unmet task is. what the unmet task is in more cases of low back pain or any other challenge I've ever seen is making the transition from doing what you think you have to do to make a living or what your parents told you you had to do or what teachers told you you had to do to doing what your heart really wants to do in more of a spiritual language, what your soul came here to do. So that's extremely common. I spend a huge amount of time with my patients and clients, helping them deal with the unmet task and the secret story that they're having to deal with because they're not really following their heart, which means that they're living out the wrong archetypes, which means they're not in a state where their heart, their emotions, and their mind and their body are in harmony because they're doing something that is ultimately fulfilling to them at a deep level. And when people are not doing what's fulfilling to them at a deep level, not only is there coping strategies, as I mentioned, that often become addictions, but their spirit does not flow through them. And so they end up feeling very bottled up inside, but more importantly, they don't achieve mastery. So what you end up with is exactly what we've got in the world right now, which is a worldwide population that is actually just in a coping strategy, but doesn't have the passion to achieve mastery, which results in a lot of mediocre work at every level. So just think how many times you've had to call for help because you had a problem with your computer, but the people on the other end in tech service were almost impossible to get any help from, seemed very uninterested in their job, or you've bought things that were new but broke down very quickly. I could tell you a million stories of my own of that. And so what you see is as people are getting more and more trapped in this industrial treadmill of living and trying to make a living, and in a consumerist ideology, a capitalistic type ideology where we've been conditioned to think that the best way to alleviate stress is to buy something. When you get caught there, you get what we have right now. And so for me, as a holistic health practitioner, I would like to be able to not only contribute to the individual, but contribute to society and culture, because we have to change culture one person at a time. You know, Lao Tzu said, the best way to change the world is to change yourself. So we have to look at these things. Then there's 4 functions of consciousness. And Carl Jung was the one that gifted us with this knowledge. They are thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. So people have generally a dominant profile. They're either thinking dominant, feeling subdominant, and then sensation and intuition are further subdominant, which means they're in the unconscious. Or they're feeling dominant, which means they're oriented toward feelings and values and emotions, or they're sensation dominant, which means they're very oriented toward what their 5 senses can perceive, or they're intuitively dominant people, and those people tend not to rely so much on thinking, feeling, and sensation, but they have more of a capacity to empty themselves and feel guidance from the mysterious place that intuition goes to or comes from, which can also be gut instinct, even though instinct is not the same as intuition. At the conscious mind, most people can't tell the difference when the information arrives if it's gut instinct or intuition. But the point being is that there's these different types of people, and we have people that are dominant in one. So whatever you see across, if you see thinking as dominance, you have feeling as a subdominance, then you're either going to be next is going to be sensation or intuition in the order of these 4. So everybody has a profile based on Jung's research. Now, why that's important, if I've got a person with low back pain, if that person is sensation dominant, intuition subdominant, and then say thinking sub, and finally feeling, then the person's going to be very, very driven by sensation. So, for example, they might be an athlete whose sense of feeling their body and processing information comes by way of the tension moving through their muscles or the breath moving through their body or the sense of their body moving. And if that person is in a stressful relationship, or is in a job they don't like, or career they don't like, or they're having challenges making enough money to feel safe and secure, then they may actually use exercise as a form of medication. And so then you can start to see people that are using exercise the way some people use sugar, alcohol, and drugs to medicate themselves, and they often become exercise addicts. And so the back pain can be coming by way of the fact that they're using a sensation dominant pathway. So as part of our work as in integrated health, we have to help them bring their capacity for thinking, intuition, and feeling up so that they're gathering information from the wholeness of consciousness. And the person who has the greatest likelihood of healing and living a fulfilling life is the person who has thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition working in a balanced way, just like people that are left brain dominant can be very good mathematically, logically, but very bad in love relationships because their feeling capacity is very shut down quite often. So there's many ways imbalances here could be related to back pain directly or indirectly. We already mentioned that having values is very, very important. For example, if you're eating low quality food, and what I've seen countless times, even with professional athletes, is that they're trying to save money on food and that they only think of food as energy. And so they shop for food like they shop for gasoline. People go for the cheapest gasoline because it's just gasoline. And they go for the cheapest foods because they think it's just energy. But we have to remember, food is our source of nutrition. Food is a source of energy. Food is a source of frequency. Just think of the colors of food. So you have pumpkins are orange. You have red meat is very red. You have blueberries that are blue. You have eggplant that's got purple hues in it. You've got red peppers. So what you're seeing is actually a frequency of the light being emitted. When you eat that food, you're actually picking up that frequency, which changes everything inside your body. Remember, you can't have an effect on the spider web without affecting the whole web. So if a person's unaware of the fact that the food they're eating is low quality and it's laden with herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides, glyphosate, all of which have severe effects on disrupting healthy modulation of the hormonal system, causing huge issues of toxicity in the body, which can cause a huge need for certain nutrients to run the detoxification pathways that they're not getting, which then leads to compensations such as having to suck minerals out of your bones, which could then lead to a predisposition to a lumbar fracture or an end plate fracture, or they're not drinking enough water or high quality water. For example, a lot of people are using reverse osmosis water filtration systems, which tends to acidify water, or they're drinking tap water, which has fluoride oftentimes in it, and chlorine in it, which has also got a negative effect on the body. People are often drinking too much caffeine, which has the effect of a diuretic effect. Alcohol has a diuretic effect on the body. So once a person's not getting the resources they need and they're not drinking enough water, they cannot hydrate their body effectively. And one of the places the body goes to get water is the lining of the stomach, because it's a thick mucous membrane. So once you reach a certain level of dehydration to protect the brain and the nervous system, the body will start extracting water from the mucous membrane of the stomach, setting you up for digestive trouble, because now the stomach can't protect itself against its own hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes. That can cause a whole knock-on effect, which can be, again, a source of pain that adds to the previous insult of back pain and magnifies it, because the body's becoming overstimulated and overtaxed. And pain is actually technically an emotion. So whenever we have a lot of pain, we have a lot of emotional stress, which then can make us short-fused, it can make us more tired, and it can make us have more problems in relationships. and it leads to more and more coping strategies, and it can lead to people stopping exercise because they're too emotionally distraught or too stressed, or it can cause them to overuse exercise. So these are just a few examples right to this point that can magnify back pain indirectly or directly, because you can't put an input into the system that doesn't affect the whole system.
If you have listened to even one episode of Paul's podcast before, then you will know that he is passionate, and some would say even fanatical, about the quality of the food he eats and where it is sourced from. That is why the CHEK household only eats pasture-raised meat, wild-caught fish, and organic produce. And that is why we subscribe to Wild Pastures Meat Delivery Service. Each month, Wild Pastures delivers a box of meat that has been raised by family farmers in the USA using regenerative farming practices. 100% grass-fed and finished beef, pasture-raised chicken, and pasture-raised pork, as well as wild-caught seafood. You can customize the selection in your box, add on extra when you know you will be feeding more people, or change your options each and every month. You might be thinking that this will be too expensive for you, but Wild Pasture's mission is to offer the highest quality meat at the lowest prices, because they want to transform the meat industry. And that means that more people need to be able to choose meat that is raised right. Their pasture-raised animals are part of a natural ecosystem. Their farmers use rotational grazing, practices that mimic nature, and so do not need to use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, or antibiotics. This beautiful process doesn't require the external resources, such as massive amounts of GMO grain, required with environmentally depleting conventional methods. And best of all, the meat and fish taste amazing. And for Paul's listeners, Wild Pastures are offering you 20% off your subscription for life, $15 off your first order, and free shipping. Seriously, you can't find a better deal for top quality pasture-raised meat. Go to wildpastures.com/PaulCheck. You don't need a promo code. Just visit wildpastures.com/PaulCheck and start choosing the goodies you will have delivered to you in your first box.
Now, you want to notice that Sunface has one eye closed. That symbolizes that if the person's coming to you because they've got back pain or anything else, they're coming to you because they're not fully conscious of the choices they're making, and or they don't have the knowledge or skill to take care of themselves. The only exception would be an acute injury, like someone rear ends you in a car accident and you get whiplash. Things like that aren't chronic problems, but the problem is everything I've just described, even in someone who fell off a ladder, had a whiplash accident, or a physical trauma like that, such as a work injury, will have almost no anabolic power because of all these things sucking energy out of the system physically, emotionally, and mentally. So one of the key things is we have to look at the story and the archetypes, and is the story that a person's living out and telling themselves empowering them, and is it actually congruent with reality? You'd be shocked at the number of stories that I have analyzed that are absolutely out of touch with reality. So what is reality? Reality is two things. Reality is what's happening right now. That's always the case. Your back hurts right now, that's reality. Reality is everything that supports your ability to live. So what does that mean? Well, reality means, are you drinking good water? And is it the right pH? And does it have adequate minerals to support your body's health? And if you are out of touch with that, you're out of touch with reality. And if you're spraying the planet with billions of pounds of herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides, glyphosate that are getting in your waterways and in your drinking water, then you're out of touch with reality. If you're eating food that's coming from the wrong sources at the wrong time, or that's overprocessed, or that's poisoned, you're out of touch with reality, because reality is what supports you. And if you don't take care of the environment, ways that support you, then back pain will just be one of the many other issues that you have to deal with. If your use of the element of fire is disrupted, for example, fire in the body is the metabolic system, the mitochondria. Fire is the breathing system. Fire is in the energy in your blood. Fire is also symbolic of desire. Fires eat, they consume. So when I'm looking at your one love or your dream, I'm looking at what is the desire that's feeding the fire, and how are you feeding the fire? So the desire is what makes the fire go. It's what, for example, someone has a lot of spirit, has a lot of fire in them because they're passionate about something. So passion for something is an expression of one's fire. But if the fire is too high because there's a lot of anger involved or resent involved, then I have to go and look at the story, the secret story, and what is the counter myth. So for example, if the story you're telling yourself is out of touch with reality, you're producing pain, imbalance, and dysfunction in relationships, all of which can lead to or exacerbate low back pain tremendously. So I was talking about back pain, and I talked about how if you aren't drinking enough water of the right type, it'll suck water out of your stomach lining, and then it'll start taking it out of the cartilage in your joints, and it can then go into the discs and start extracting water from the discs to try to keep the brain and nervous system functioning. And so once you start getting even mild dehydration of connective tissues and discs and joints, if you're, say, 40 plus years of age today, you've already got natural wear and tear on the spine. Most people are dehydrated. About 95% of the world population is dehydrated based on research. If you had a previous injury, or you were an athlete or a football player, you can have pre-existing injuries, and you can already have degenerative changes in the joint. You can have things like spondylolysis, spondylolisthesis, retrolisthesis, end plate fractures. You can have foraminal stenosis. You can have spinal stenosis. You can have cysts that are synovial cysts pinching on nerves because there's too much load on the facet joints of the spine, which are stabilizing joints in the spine, all of which can lead to nerve impingement. And I've had many cases of nerve impingement where they had such severe sciatic pain, but I noticed they were very dehydrated. And so all I had to do was teach them how to drink the right quality water, rehydrate them, and that was enough hydration to open the disc space. So all of a sudden the nerve pain went away. And so now naturally there's other things I've got to do, but sometimes it's as simple as drinking enough water. So here we see an example where one element, water, can be very related to back pain. Air is the element of breathing. Breathing is one of your chief biological pumps. It's the chief biological pump. So every time you breathe, your diaphragm should drop down. When you inhale, because your diaphragm attaches to the anterior of the lumbar spine, when you inhale and the diaphragm, think of a giant umbrella contracting, it pushes your organs down. That's why your belly expands when you inhale. That diaphragm contracting causes a lifting force on the lumbar spine, which helps decrease pressure in the lumbar disc. So as you inhale, all your spinal curves decrease and you actually get a little bit taller. Then when you exhale and diaphragm drops down and the belly relaxes, comes back in, but your muscles relax. So when you exhale, there's a little tone in the abdominal muscles just to push the air out. If not much, it's usually this tension in the muscles that's natural on the exhale. But if you're running or breathing fast or exerting yourself, then you will push air out with the abdominal muscles. But the key point is the act of inhaling, diaphragm dropping down, but abdominal muscles have to relax a little bit to let the belly expand. On the exhale, then the muscles come back in and there's a pressure fluctuation. So that pressure fluctuation is not only a huge aid to the heart to move blood, arterial blood and venous blood through the system, mostly venous blood, but it pumps lymphatic fluid through the system, which helps keep the body clean and supports the immune system. And so what I'm trying to show you here is if they have an air element problem and they're not breathing correctly, which is as common as you can imagine, in all my years as a therapist, I could probably count the number of people on two hands out of thousands of people that I've assessed that had a normal breathing pattern. So what I'm showing you here is with every inhalation, your spine gets longer and the pressures in the spine decrease. Then on the exhalation, the curves increase and pressures in the discs increase. So you've got a pressure fluctuation in every disc in the spine with every breath. And because the disc itself does not have a direct arterial supply, it's fed through a process called imbibition, which really just means pressure fluctuations. So the fluid's coming in through osmosis and diffusion, and it's pumped by the breathing mechanism and by physical activity. But the breathing mechanism is the chief pump. So not only is your breathing essential to circulation, essential to lymphatic return, to venous return to take pressure off the heart, essential to lymphatic flow, but it's essential to hydrating and nourishing the discs, because the only way oxygen, blood, and nutrition can get in and waste can get out is through that process of imbibition. When people have breathing pattern disorders, they often have regions of their spine that are held rigid, often because of unresolved emotions, traumas, or fear patterns. And that can cause, and can and does cause back pain like crazy. It's endless is the cases of back pain that I found coupled to a breathing pattern disorder. And when you teach people how to breathe correctly and you stretch the right muscles and strengthen the right muscles to bring their posture back into alignment, sometimes that's all you have to do to alleviate back pain, because that chronic imbalance is what was leading to it. So then we have the issues of the mind. The air element relates to the mind. So any issue of mind, we've talked about a bunch of it with archetypes, but people who are overly dogmatic in opinions, don't change their diet and lifestyle when their body's telling them they need to. People that have weird beliefs, any ism that's not challenged, such as veganism, is an example. Any kind of a ideology that has an ism attached to it, scientism, Rastafarianism, which also is vegetarian, but any ism, which is a belief system, can lead you into thinking and behavior patterns that are actually causing stress and are not allowing you to adapt to the necessary changes in the environment. So during COVID, for example, we saw the effects of medicalism and scientific materialism and scientism all converge. And so people that weren't actually able to get out of the way of a belief system and do some holistic thinking and ask who, what, why, when, where, and how. That's what you got to ask to think holistically. Who is it for? What does it do? Why should I or shouldn't I do it? When should I or shouldn't do it? And how does it work or not work? Those are critical questions. So people that have rigid thinking have often got bodies that mirror that rigidity and also have an inability to effectively adapt to changes in the environment. And when you can't adapt to changes in the environment, your story, remember your myth is your story, which is your way of thinking and believing, meets a counter myth, which is when the pain teacher shows up. And so all of a sudden you can find yourself in a financial crisis, a relationship crisis. And because the low back region is connected to the root chakra, which is the center of our body, where the psychophysical relationship is safety, security, tribal association, and wanting to belong, anything we saw during COVID, all the infighting with families because they had different values and beliefs, and it led to chaos. And so what you see is there's a tremendous convergence of a belief system not being able to adapt to reality, which creates a huge amount of stress. And since the low back is the region that has the most weight on it, the lumbar disc, L5S1, carries the greatest weight of all the spinal discs because all the other discs, vertebrae, are stacked on top of it. So think of a stack of stones. The one at the bottom will be the biggest, but it'll also have the most weight on it. So the L5S1 junction, which is where people are most commonly injured, is the foundation stone, and it's connected to the psychological need for safety, security, tribal association, wanting to belong. And that links very heavily to your financial stability and anything that you think or perceive as a threat to your survival. So we have to really be very conscious, not only of the breathing mechanism and the oxygenation of the body and the blood and the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide, because that has a huge effect on the autonomic system. For example, if someone's breathing too fast because they're stressed, because they're in a counter myth, and they're having a hard time dealing with reality, and maybe they're about to lose a job or a spouse, then what you're going to have happen is that they're going to have a breathing pattern that's going to reflect that. That's going to disrupt the pumping mechanisms of the body. They're going to have a lot of stress and belief about that, which puts them into conflict with people, which is going to cause the body to hold energy in the region of the physical and psychic relationship root chakra, which is right in the lumbar distribution. So in other words, issues of safety, security, tribal association, wanting to belong that are unresolved tend to be active and dissipate themselves through the tissues in the lower lumbar region and down the legs. So there's a psychophysical relationship. We can go through all of these elements and it can get quite complex, as you can see, and there's a lot of information to gather. But what I want to do, we'll just finish a few. If your diet's wrong, the earth element, and your exercise program and stretching program are not producing good postural alignment, and your joint health is not good, then your structure starts to break down. So that would be earth, anything solid, okay? We talked about water, we've talked about fire, over-exercise, under-exercise, over-mentalizing, having desire for things that are not really necessary and spending your money on things that you don't really need, but you're maybe, distracted, or you are convincing yourself that you have a better car, you'll look better, or you're trying to get social status or whatever it might be. You look around, you'll see what people do all the time. Then that can cause a tremendous change in the fire element, because now, for example, you might have to work extra hours at work to pay the $1,000 a month car payment and cut back on the quality of food you're eating. And I've seen this happen even with professional athletes making millions of dollars a year, believe it or not. So these are things that we have to look into. Now, what I want to draw your attention to now is these labels here between the elements are called control systems. So fire produces heat, and the body has to be maintained very close to 98.6 degrees, as most of you are aware. And if we don't maintain that temperature, it only goes in two directions. If it's hotter than that, it means, for example, if you're exercising real hard, then we have a metabolic reason for that. But if somebody's resting body temperature rises up to, say, 100, we call that a fever. That means the immune system is trying to protect the body. And due to the activity of the immune system, there's increased heat, but that means something. So we always want to watch temperature. If temperature goes down chronically, that usually indicates that someone's becoming hypothyroid, which is a common knock-on effect from chronic adrenal fatigue. And the adrenal glands are the ones that release cortisol, which is the activating hormone and the chief anti-inflammatory hormone in the body. But if people are staying up too long, pushing themselves and dealing with a lot of stress, you can actually keep the cortisol level so high it disrupts your ability to sleep and recover at night, because cortisol is antagonistic to melatonin, and melatonin is the precursor to all your anabolic hormones that allow your body to heal at night. So body is under too much stress too long, and the fire system forces the body into a recovery. So then the body now goes to the water system, and the person starts to hold fluid, starts to get a cold body, temperatures drop down all the way down into the 97s and sometimes lower. People get very mentally lethargic, energetically, they're very flat. They have no desire to do anything. It's a protective mechanism. It's a forced rest. But then what does most doctors do? They give them thyroid stimulating hormone so that they can keep doing the same things that screwed them up in the first place. and it drives the pathology deeper and can lead to a serious disease process. And for people with low back pain, this means that their ability to heal is getting less and less and less and less because they have less and less reserves. They have less and less nutritional reserve, less and less emotional reserve, less and less energy to work with, and less capacity for mental, emotional flexibility. So you end up getting people that end up anxious and depressed and get put on a lot of drugs, which then further causes toxicity in the body, which then puts more of a body burden. So it's just a downhill spiral. You're just driving yourself right toward a serious crisis of some kind, and that unfortunately happens all too much. So temperature here is very important. Remember, all fires have to have air. You can't have effective management of fire without effective management of the air element in the body, which is chiefly how we breathe. Fire is representative of our desires, which is representative of our dreams or lack thereof, and representative of whether or not we're following our heart. And fire stimulates the mind. Dead people don't think. They're cold. So the more you increase fire, the more you increase the activity of the mind. And if you're using your mind in ways that are potentially overtaxing you or disruptive, then the activity of the mind, air, overstimulates fire and can burn the body out. And most of you are aware of that. Surely you've had the experience in school of taking a test for a couple of hours and walking out feeling exhausted, even though all you would do is sitting there and, answering test questions. But you see, the mind is extremely energy consumptive and can exhaust the body. So the mind itself can bring up the demand of the fire, but if we're not feeding the fire adequate nutritional resources, in other words, putting into the fire what helps keep the body healthy, and we don't have adequate water to support fire control or temperature control, then we start having problems with body temperature regulation. And if you're already dealing with low back pain and you start having these kinds of problems, now your body's dividing its healing resources amongst many of these key survival systems. And because the musculoskeletal system is actually fairly low on the totem pole compared to things like your brain, your eyes, your inner ear, your upper cervical spine, your glands, and your organs, then the back's going to be low on the totem pole for what the body tries to heal. Because if you've got cancer growing in you, that's a lot bigger threat than a bulging disc or any kind of back pain. So your back pain can be very, very protracted because you don't realize you're not able to heal because you have too many of these other factors in play. So between fire and air, we have the modulation of, or the control system called temperature. Between air and water, we have rhythm, pressure, and flow. It takes heat and air and water to generate the rhythm, pressure, and flow of the body. So when I'm dealing with someone who has low back pain, I want to know what is the kind of pressure they're dealing with. If their posture is off, they've got too much curve or not enough curve, it's going to disrupt pressure distribution through the spinal discs and facet joints, and that can lead to chronic problems or acute problems. I also want to look at what kind of pressure they're having mentally and emotionally within themselves and in their relationships, because remember, all stress summates, and anytime we have pressure in key relationships, we're often dealing with threats to our safety, security, tribal association, and wanting to belong, and that leads more energy to being stuck in the body in the lumbopelvic and leg region. So you start seeing the accumulation of psychological energy, which has sort of a binding energy. So think of when you're really upset at somebody, you carry them around everywhere and they might burn a hole in your gut. And so you might hear people saying things like, so-and-so makes me sick to my stomach, or so-and-so is a real pain in the back. Well, there you go. You got it. So often we're actually saying what's really going on with us using metaphor, but most doctors and therapists are not listening carefully enough. And so when it comes to pressure, we also have to look at things like blood pressure, because our blood pressure is a very good indicator of our internal health and our stress. And somebody with high blood pressure and low back pain can end up having low back pain as a side effect of low blood pressure or high blood pressure, or the high and low blood pressure can be directly related to, for example, having pain in the back, and being chronically in pain all the time can be so stressful it can give you high blood pressure, but often it will be treated as a separate issue. So those are some examples of pressure, rhythm. Then we have to look at rhythms like the 24-hour circadian rhythm. And the number of people that I see with low back pain that are staying up way late at night and not getting near enough sleep is shockingly high. So once you start disrupting the sleep-wake cycle, you end up disrupting the entire regulatory function of your hormonal system, because the sleep-wake cycle is what governs your anabolic and catabolic hormones. And so it's extremely common for people with low back pain to have disruption of the day-night rhythms for any number of reasons, mostly distractions, unfortunately, and most of it is distractions to medicate the dissatisfaction with the career they've chosen, or the job they're working at, the way they're making money, or the education that they've gotten because it was to make mommy and daddy happy instead of doing what they really wanted to do. And now they feel trapped and they've got huge loans and there's a threat to safety and security. And so off we go to the races. So one of the key rhythms is the day-night rhythm. But then you have the rhythm of eating. Are you eating at regular intervals? We have the rhythm of bowel movement. And if we're not getting adequate bowel movement, or the bowel movements are too fast, it disrupts many things that I don't have time to explain. But there's an example of a rhythm. Your urinary rhythm, your breathing rate and rhythm is very, very critical. Just to give you an example, physiology texts say the average person should breathe approximately 17 breaths per minute, or 16 to 18. But that just goes to show you what happened when you read text based on average people, because average people are not healthy people, they're average. And that's more true today than ever. Having been working with breathing issues and teaching people how to breathe and assessing breathing rates, I have found consistently over my entire career of assessing these things that a healthy person breathes 6 to 10 breaths a minute. When you're breathing a normal breathing rhythm, then your body's in a more natural, stable state, and you're oxygenating properly, and you're maintaining the balance of oxygen and CO2, which means that your sympathetic, or your fight or flight branch of your autonomic system, is in balance with your parasympathetic, your digest, metabolize, assimilate, and regenerate system. But whenever you're in pain, such as low back pain, or under stress, or you're living the life you didn't want to live, or you're stuck in a belief system and you're doing things that are counterproductive, like believing the only way to live is a vegetarian, yet your parents both come from a region in the world where the ground freezes, and your genes are designed to have fat and flesh foods to get you through the winter because plants don't grow in ice, yet you're caught in this ideology, or you're a fruitarian, or any number of interesting ways of relating that are going against your body's needs, then you're going to create trouble. And when you're eating out of balance, it's going to throw your rhythms out of balance. So without going through all the rhythms, because there's plenty of them, then we have flow. So for example, if you have back pain and you're an athlete, it will obstruct your natural flow in movement. So you will start having to compensate the way you're lifting, the way you're moving, the way you're throwing implements or swinging implements, all gets disrupted due to compensation. And so it disrupts the natural rhythm and flow of the body. When we say to somebody, how did your day go? And they say it flowed along nicely, we understand what they mean right away. But if we're trying to get things done and we keep getting obstructed, or traffic's heavy, or unexpected surprises, then our flow gets disrupted, and it causes pressure and tension, and it disrupts the breathing mechanism if you're not conscious enough to regulate it. And if your circulation is disrupted and you're not breathing properly, you cannot get enough blood flow to the discs due to the pressure, tension, and breathing disruption, then the flow leads to a contribution to back pain. So there's just a few examples. Then we go to the energy potential. Somebody who has back pain has to have enough energy potential to heal. So they have to have enough anabolic energy to supply the body with the energy to do the healing, and it has to have the nutrients and the essential resources to heal whichever tissues need to be healed. And unfortunately, a lot of not only people with back pain, but almost everything out there don't, because their diets are so bad, they're in a serious state of nutritional deficiency, or what is classically called malnutrition. But most people think just because you're eating a lot of food, you couldn't be malnourished, which is the furthest thing from the truth. Just to give you an example, research shows that today you would have to eat 20 heads of lettuce to get the same nutrient value that was in one head of lettuce 50 years ago. So most people out there don't realize that even if they're eating what looks like a good whole food diet, but it's coming from commercially farmed food, they're eating food that has so little nutrition in it and so much toxicity in it that it's throwing their entire body out of balance. And they don't have the energy potential due to the fact, remember, 52% of the calories is what goes to just running it from mouth to anus. So unfortunately, a lot of people are eating foods that is so nutritionally void that every single meal they eat is actually pushing them deeper into a nutritional deficit and into a higher level of global toxicity, which causes knock-on effects. So for example, what you can get is high levels of mercury, which causes neural entanglements, which then confuses the nervous system's ability to coordinate the body. And I've had many elite athletes with too many mercury amalgam fillings who have had a bunch of vaccines. And when I test their mercury levels, they're 5, 8, 10 times higher than healthy. And I can't get their bodies to heal because the nervous system is too dysregulated and confused. So oftentimes, before I can be effective with corrective exercises and all the other things I want to do, I have to put them through a pretty comprehensive heavy metal detoxification program and other forms of detox just to get the body to start functioning correctly while I get them on high quality organic food and get their water situation straightened out and get them sleeping adequately and doing all the things that I have to do. So energy potential is very critical. So now we're at the control system between fire and earth, which is called the ecosystem. E for energy, C for chemistry, H for hydration, O for the organisms you eat. So every fire has to be fed, and everything you eat is a product of the earth, which includes its water and its air or sky. Everything you eat, if you're eating what's right for your individual needs, brings the right type and amount of energy for your body's needs. For example, eating processed sugar is a completely different type of energy than you would get from eating a pear or something alive and healthy and organic. Because if you're eating processed sugar, you're getting something that's void of nutrition and high in energy. And so that stimulates all the cells of the body to move faster, but it's not bringing in the energy to do the work to repair the cell for having to move so much quicker and be so much more dynamic, excited. Just like if you're overstimulated, then your body's using a lot of energy. You can see when people drink too much coffee or eat too much sugar, they literally start to buzz and sweat. Watch kids go and you'll see it. And so we have to look at the type of energy and what's the energy source doing with our chemistry. For example, drinking a lot of caffeinated beverages like coffee, if you have back pain, right away I want to know what's the health of your adrenal glands, because if the adrenal glands are under too much load, they send any pain or distress. Remember, disease means dis-ease, too much energy. The adrenals are linked right into the low back system, so are the kidneys. So oftentimes low back pain is the side effect of adrenal stress because the adrenals are outgassing their excess stress into the low back to create contraction. So the contraction produces heat. So you take a gland or an organ that's overstimulated, pump that into muscle. Muscle contracts. The contraction takes energy. The production of heat dissipates energy out of the body. So it's a self-regulating system. So just like you have a fuse in a house and a circuit board in the breaker box, so that if you put too much energy through a circuit, it won't overheat the wire and light the house on fire. It'll blow the breaker. What your body does is uses the musculoskeletal system as the fuse box for the organs to protect the organs from overload, because that's what the word dis-ease means. So any of the organs in the pelvic basin and around your belly button have linkages to your low back. So any problem with your bladder, your sigmoid colon, your kidneys, or your sex organs can actually trigger changes in the tone of the muscles and the function of the joints and the circulation and the capacity for the body to clean, feed, and detoxify itself, that lead to chronic back pain or stop the back from healing. So then we talked about hydration, and then we look at the organisms, because if the organisms, the plants and the animals that we're eating, are not right for our metabolic needs, then it can create not only a metabolic crisis, an energy crisis, but it creates a nutritional crisis. And we each have genetic needs, just like an Eskimo has a much higher need for fat and protein than they do for carbohydrate. But somebody that was born and raised in a Hawaiian family will have a greater need for carbohydrate and lighter foods and more carbohydrate-based foods, and probably be more oriented toward fish than they would towards heavy fat and protein. So you can see, depending on the weather and the environment, which is the echo means what is the environment sending to you, and what are you doing to the environment? So ECHO is an acronym that literally means echo. Whatever you do to the environment, you poison it with chemicals, it poisons you back, because you eat it, you drink it, and you breathe it. And if you're poisoning yourself and becoming less conscious, and you keep doing it to the environment, then not only does the environment push back against you with changes that are antagonistic to life, but then you go into a stress reaction trying to survive. So we've seen all these fires that have been happening in the last couple of years. That's a very stressful thing that could easily lead to back pain, because it goes to that safety and security center and can burn you out, dry you out. And fear winds the system up, and fear causes a response in the breathing system, the adrenal system. So all of these are driving the whole system. So now I'll finish with one more explanation. Know that the goal of working with someone who's skilled at integrated health is to open the closed eye, which means to become aware of all these factors and to learn what's the most important thing to do at any given time, so that for every amount of energy and time you spend, a CHEK professional wants to make sure you're doing the things that are the most likely to get you the fastest results, that are the least expensive and the most easily done by anybody. That's how the system's built by me, for reasons of making it realistic, so that it's not just burning people's finances out, and it's teaching them what they can do to take care of themselves. So to kind of conclude, now what I've been doing is showing you what I have to look at for just a simple case of back pain, which could be a serious case, but it doesn't matter what you tell me: shoulder pain, digestive trouble, health crisis, relationship crisis, midlife crisis. I have to look at all this, because these are the things that make a human being a human being. And a human being is part of the earth and part of the environment, and the earth and the environment are inherently in them and create your body. So now if we take this whole map and divide it into four, so a vertical line down the middle and a horizontal line here, you'll get four quadrants, which are labeled personal interior, personal exterior, collective interior, and collective exterior. So what these coordinates are, this comes from Ken Wilber's four-quadrant system, which I began incorporating as soon as I learned about it, probably, 25 years ago. But what this points to here is personal interior is your inner life. That's the home of your myth and your secret story. Whenever there's a gap between the story you tell yourself and the story you tell other people, you're increasing stress in your body, and almost always you're creating a threat to your own inner sense of safety and security, which again links right to the root chakra and commonly is linked to low back pain. And that the greater the gap between the story you tell yourself and the story you tell other people, the more energy it costs you to maintain the gap, because it means that you're incongruent within yourself. And that leads to stress. And stress adds to all these other issues going on in people's lives. So the personal interior then is the domain of the soul. It's the domain of your feeling. It's the domain of your values. It's the domain of your beliefs. It's the domain of what you sense to be yourself on the inside. In Jungian psychology, it's the domain of the inner ego. The inner ego relates to how you judge, relate to love or don't love yourself on the inside. The outer ego is what you present to other people. So the greater the gap between the inner ego and the outer ego, the more psychological stress there is, which creates physiological stress, which then overflows to the weak link in the system. And because the back is right in the middle of the body and it's directly connected to the key glands that are related to regulating stress in the body, the adrenals, it's not only in the epicenter of the biomechanical forces moving through the body, it's in the epicenter of the stress response mechanisms that deal with our emotions, our mind, and our beliefs. So the personal interior is the home of our story, our secret story, our story gap, and it's often where we have a mental emotional confrontation with the counter myth, which is the story that's opposing our story. Okay, so for example, someone says, you better do this or you're going to die or you're going to get sick. And then your inner story is either one of belief and response, or it's one of questioning and asking who, what, why, when, where, how, what's the best for me, what's the best for my family or whoever's involved, and doing the work to figure that out. So your counter myth is either going to be one that says the myth that's being told to everybody about such and such on TV or the social media is one, but my personal myth is either countering it or is congruent with it. And if it's a counter myth, there's always stress. Whenever a culture's myth breaks down, there's the emergence of new myths, usually isms first, and oftentimes there's a lot of war and a lot of death and a lot of destruction until the two myths amalgamate into each other, and the same is true of every human being. So again, your personal interior is a domain of the soul, your inner sanctum of thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, values, and your sense of self. Your personal exterior relates to anything about you that's weighable or measurable or can be filmed. So your posture, your gesture, your strength, your biochemistry, and this is the source. The personal interior is the source of your personal story or your myth that you are the star of. We're always the star of our own story, and this is the actor that's acting it out. So whenever someone shows up with low back pain, I have to look at what is the inner story that's leading to the beliefs and the choices and the behaviors that led to the back pain, because the back pain shows up as here as something that I can measure with sensory tests, with motor tests, with nerve conduction tests, with MRIs, etc. So here I see the effects of the choices being driven from the personal interior. Then we have the collective interior, and this is the cast and crew of your story. So this is everybody else that's involved in your life, starting with the core of your family, being mom, dad, immediate family, and progressing outward in order of influence and importance. And none of us can have a story or live without a cast and crew. For example, we're the star of our own story, but we couldn't be here without a mother and a father. And we couldn't grow and evolve without family and society because, nobody can grow and evolve by themselves, nor can they experience love by themselves. And a lot of people's back pain turns out to be from conflicts in relationships with people that are cast and crew. So cast is the people closest to you, but crew can be somebody like somebody who's working on your house, anybody that's supporting the unfolding of your story. Your mechanic works on your car, which is important to your ability to get places and do your work. So the mechanic would be crew, but the people that you're more involved would be cast. All story has cast and crew. So the point is, whenever our personal soul self is in conflict with other soul selves, like we saw heavily during COVID, chronic back pain and spontaneous emergence of back pain, or getting very fragile, and all of a sudden you get a physical injury because your body's so depleted and exhausted from not sleeping well, not eating well, and not managing yourself well due to the stress, that all of a sudden you got a back problem to deal with. So here is where our myth, our personal inner story, meets the story of everybody we interact with. And we know from COVID that sometimes husbands and wives and brothers and sisters and moms and dads have very different myths. And those different myths produce a counter myth, which can lead to tremendous stress, which, as we saw, led to a lot of alcohol and drug consumption, tremendous levels of anxiety, depression, and increased rates of suicide, and a lot of increased back pain. I can assure you of that one. So that's what we got to look at. Over here, we have the collective exterior. That's the world stage. So the collective exterior has anything to do with your environment, your home, your car, the ergonomics. For example, if you're sitting at a desk and it's not set up correctly, your seat pan isn't adjusted correctly, your seat height's not correct, your keyboard height's not correct, your monitor height's not correct, but you sit and type for hours a day, that could easily trigger back pain all by itself. Throw that collective exterior or environmental factor in with all this, you got problems. I talked about herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides, poisoning of the environment, energy, chemistry, hydration in the organism. That's all collective exterior. But once you eat it, it enters into your body and it is part of your interior. And that all affects your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your choices, your consciousness, your energy readiness, your ability to handle stress, your ability to deal with challenges. And to the degree that you cannot face the challenges before you, you're highly likely to have low back pain, because your low back, as I said before, is linked right to your stress response systems. And people that have low back pain often have troubles with their sex organs, because if there is too much stress, the body will shut down production of sex hormones to produce anti-inflammatory hormones and stress modulation hormones, to put it simply. In other words, your body thinks it's more important to fight the dragon than it is to have babies, because if the environment's not safe for babies, it shuts the sex organs down to make sure it can modulate stress more effectively. So there's the 4 quadrants. So I have to look, for example, with a person with low back pain, external environment, are they lifting weights correctly? Is their body being used in the gym correctly? I mentioned the ergonomics. Is the car seat or truck seat worn out? I've worked with many back pain patients that were truck drivers who had seats that were worn out, and they were getting too much vibration and degenerating their lumbar spine. So think of anything in the environment that's potentially a threat to you: temperature fluctuations, toxicity, all the things that are in the environment relate to this. And that, for example, relates to the fact that we're poisoning the water, we're poisoning the sky, we're poisoning the soil. And that external environment ends up becoming food, the air we breathe and the water we drink. And that affects our ability to regulate all of these systems. So now I went fairly quickly just for time's sake. as you can see, there's a lot to this. And trust me when I tell you that when you go through training as a CHEK professional and you go through holistic lifestyle coaching level 1, 2, and 3, you get deeper and deeper and deeper into the understanding of this. And we teach you pieces of the model so you can use them at the level of your training. But by the time you are an IMS 5, Integrated Movement Science 5, that's the highest level, you're now at the graduate level, you will have very in-depth skills at analyzing all these things. You'll be very skilled at writing programs. You'll be very skilled at helping people choose effective healing strategies. You'll know many different types of meditation and different types of inner work techniques. You'll know many different functional medicine tests that can be done to isolate toxicity levels, hormone levels. You'll be a master with corrective exercise, stretching, joint mobilization. You'll know how to refer to a wide variety of other types of doctors and therapists and healthcare and allied healthcare professionals. So you know how to create a team of the people that a person needs in order to resolve their problem, not only effectively get to the root cause, but do it for the long term. And so that's what integrated health really is. And in my career, I've found you cannot escape this. Now, I could have taken you through a much deeper breakdown. There's a lot of things I haven't explained because it would just be too technical without more training. But one of the things I want to point out is that I have a number of available courses that are online, or some of them you can come to live. My scientific core conditioning teaches you how to analyze the function of your core, your abdominal wall, pelvic floor, diaphragm, deep spinal stabilizers, which is the most important region of your body for stabilizing your body and pumping your body. And basically, it's the core of your body. So scientific core conditioning is one of my most famous courses. It's recently been redone and updated. Scientific back training gives you all sorts of assessments to identify what's causing back pain and how to go about correcting it. It's the sister program to scientific core, and they're like two halves of a coin. How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I talked about. We have Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1 online. So you can actually go through the first level of Holistic Lifestyle Coach, and that's designed for the public as well. It's not overly technical. It's meant to get people the basic training. It goes beyond How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, but it is still palatable. We've had, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids take it with parents many times. Integrated Movement Science Level 1 can be done online. That would be what I would recommend for any strength coach or personal trainer or massage therapist or somebody that wants to learn how to use exercise, stretching, and joint mobilization in a scientific way to get best results. It's a fantastic course for anybody that's a serious athlete. And then we do have a special offer for all of you listening to the podcast. If you go, it's my Flatten Your Abs Forever. We've redone my Flatten Your Abs Forever program, which shows you a myriad of things about how to flatten your abdominal wall in a healthy way. And it shows you all the things that people don't realize are causing their belly to not work correctly or to accumulate fat. It was while I was traveling the lecture tour circuit for 25 years, it was most commonly sold out and huge turnouts to that because it blew people's minds. Some of you may have heard Kyle Kingsbury tell the story about when he was a professional cage fighter, his coach turned him on to Flatten Your Abs Forever, and that changed his life and his body, and that's how he became a student of mine, and now he's one of my best buddies. And that's been many years now. And so you have Integrated Movement Science online, but you can go to chek.group/flat abs. And not only will you get the free Flatten Your Abs Forever newly revised program, but we have a few other great offers for you that Penny will have shared during the podcast. So my dream for the podcast, considering the environment we're in, medically, politically, environmentally, with regard to food and farming, and with regard to belief systems and all the craziness going on in the world, I really wanted to share what integrated health really is and what are the things we have to consider and what is it that a CHEK professional is taught to do in the course of their training and why, and let you know that there's a lot of options. My book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, as I said right in the beginning, is something I believe everybody should study, especially if they're an athlete or a parent. You have all these courses online or available through the CHEK Institute. I think today, more than ever, we really need to not only understand the basics of integrated health, but we have to take responsibility for doing the work to integrate ourselves as a human being. And I'll remind you that begins with one love. What do I love enough to grow and change for and become? If that's not there, you'll never have enough passion and enough love in you to overcome the inertia of the environment and the center of gravity of the average person in society. Remember, misery loves company. So it always takes energy to climb above the average. That's just a fact. So then two, where am I out of balance with regard to that which is costing me energy and resources versus how much energy, nutrition, and resources am I accumulating? So yang out versus yin in, what choices am I making, and how am I managing these four doctors, and do I have values to support my clearly stated dream? And am I making dream affirmative choices? And if I'm not, I'm going to be dealing with a counter myth, and the pain teacher will show up, and often the back is right where the pain teacher sticks the pitchfork first, due to the location of the back and the glands and the organs connected to it. So I hope you found the podcast informative. I look forward to sharing something amazing with you next week. I'll close by saying thank you to all my sponsors for your amazing products and for putting money in the hands of free-range, regenerative, organic, and biodynamic farmers to take care of the planet for us. Anything you buy from the sponsors helps support them and their amazing companies who make products and foods that we use right here in my family, and my body is made out of those beautiful foods. And thank you to all of you for being the change the world needs now, sharing the episodes with anyone that you think could benefit from what I share in my podcasts. And I will see you, or you will hear me next week with the most awesome podcast I can deliver. Aho.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul CHEK. Make sure to follow Paul on his social media, Instagram and TikTok at paul.chek, X at Paul CHEK, and his YouTube channel, youtube.com/Paul CHEK Live. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube. And finally, please support our sponsors, CHEK Institute, Organifi, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, Peak Life, and Correct. And check out their Black Friday specials. The links are in the show notes.